The scripture reading today comes from 2 Samuel 7, 1 through 14. Now, when the king was settled in his house, and the Lord had given him rest from all of his enemies around him, the king said to the prophet Nathan, "See now, I am living in a house of cedar." Now, cedar was very valuable back in their time. You know, we think of cedar as logs, you know, fence posts, and maybe some dressing in a room and so on that somebody else will come and cover later. But back in these days, cedar was very valuable. So what he's saying is David's living well. He's living well. But the ark of our God is staying in a tent. Nathan said to the king, "Go do all that you have in mind, for the Lord is with you." But that same night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan. "Go and tell my servant David, thus says the Lord, are you the one to build me a house to live in? I have not lived in a house since the day I brought the people of Israel from Egypt on this day. But I have been moving about in a tent and a tabernacle. Wherever I have moved among all the people of Israel, did I ever speak a word? Any of the tribal leaders of Israel, whom I commanded to shepherd my people of Israel, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar?" See, God never complained. You know? He didn't mind being in the tent. He liked moving around. "Now, therefore, you shall say to my servant David, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be prince over my people. And I have been with you wherever you went. I have cut off your enemies from before you. And I will make for you a great name, like the name of the great ones on earth. And I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, so that they may live in their own place and be disturbed no more. And evildoers shall afflict them no more, as formerly. From the time that I have appointed judges over my people Israel, I will give you rest from all your enemies. Moreover, the Lord declares to you that the Lord will make you a house." When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come forth from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. Prophecy. I love prophecy. And you know, it's kind of amazing. You know, I do a lot of research on prophecy. And of Christians as a whole, I'm not talking about just us, right? I'm talking about Christians as a whole. Only 1% of all Christians have ever read the book of Revelation. 1%. Some don't read it because they don't understand. Of course, you got to do some background to help understand what's going on in Revelation. But others don't read it because they don't really want to know. Because Jesus tells us in Matthew 24, that There has never been a time before. There's never been a time, he's talking about his time, and there will never be a time in the future that is worse than going through the 70th week. The 70th week, referred to in Daniel, is the 7-year tribulation. Never a time. So here's what I don't understand. Why don't people want to know that? Because how can you be prepared if you don't know what you're in for? And if you know what you're in for, why wouldn't you be prepared? And you know, it's not that difficult. All we have to do is accept the grace of God. Accept Jesus as the Messiah. Accept him as the Son of God. Because when the day comes, and this is in the future, this is prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled, but when the day comes, we're told in Thessalonians that he's going to appear in the cloud. And he's going to look into our hearts and our minds, and he knows everything that's going on within each and every one of us. I know so many people who say, yeah, I'm a Christian. Then I watch them the rest of the time and say, I don't think so. At least not by my definition of being a Christian. They think lip service is going to get them caught up to Jesus in the cloud. We call it the rapture. But the word rapture isn't used in the scriptures. But it comes from a Greek word that means rapture. To be caught up. Lip service being a Christian will not get us caught up. You know, the scriptures tell us that the dead will rise first and be joined, because all the spirits of the dead will be with Christ, and they'll be joined with their new and improved body. I can't wait to get a new and improved body. I don't know about you all. I'm tired of these aches and pains and things that go with being a human. I love being a human, don't get me wrong. But just imagine being caught up, having a new and improved body that will live eternally. That is something to live for. And all we have to do to put ourselves in that position is to accept Jesus as the Messiah. Truly. And I truly believe, because you're looking at one of them, that if you accept Jesus as the Messiah truly in your heart and mind, your behaviors probably will change. I am not the person I started out to be. I am not. Nor do I want to go back to that. Am I ashamed of what I've done in the past? Would I do it over? The answer is no. Because from every one of those lessons, guess what? I have learned. And I know what to not go to when I am tempted by you know who. You know, we call him Satan, we call him the dragon, we call him the devil. And trust me, he goes through my mind daily. But scriptures tell us that. Tell him to go away. And he'll go. Yeah, he'll go, but guess what? He doesn't give up. And our armor against him is knowing the scriptures. And that's another interesting statistic. The vast majority of Christians that come to church have never read the Bible. They depend on somebody else to tell them bits and pieces that makes them feel good. The Bible is full of prophecies that aren't designed to make us feel good. They're designed to inform us. That's one thing I love about God. He forewarns us. He tells us the blueprint. He tells us what we need to do and the consequences for not doing it. He is the ultimate parent. But the beauty about him versus most parents that I know is that he tells us right up front throughout the scriptures what it is we need to do. If not, there will be consequences. If our name isn't written in the book of life, we're headed someplace where there's no air conditioning. And I don't know about you, but I live in Texas, and I like air conditioning. So I can relate to that. I do not want to go to a place that God originally built for fallen angels. He did not intend that for human beings. However, we are since the fall of Adam and Eve, we all have this streak in us. And not only did we get this curse, this streak, it's easy to be bad. I'm going to kind of explain it to you. It's so easy to be bad. It's easy. You know, the wants of the world and so on and so forth, we get captivated in it. And it consumes a lot of people. And it's easy because we all have that streak. But not only when Adam and Eve fell did we get cursed, but the whole earth got cursed. And prophecy tells us that at the end of the millennium period and the white throne judgment, God's going to remake the world, remake the heavens, in preparation for what? New Jerusalem. And I don't know about y'all, but I want to live there. And to live there, I have to accept Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God, truly in my heart and mind. Plus, I don't want to go through the 7-year tribulation. I mean, I have read Revelation numerous times. And actually, I do a Bible study on all these things. And it's not a place I want to be on this earth during that time period. Jesus describes it. There has never been a time, will there never be a time as bad as that time? It's going to be bad in the first 3.5 years. But when God unleashes his 7 bowls in the second half, holy moly. There's no way I want to be a human being. And those who are left behind, during the tribulation period, that do accept Jesus during that time, the scriptures tell us that they're going to lose their head. We're all going to die in human form anyway. But what's important is where their spirit goes. God is the only one that can kill the spirit and the body. Everybody else can only kill the what? The body. And at the end of the tribulation period, they'll be joined with their new and improved bodies. They're going to be happy. But for you and I, there's no need for us to even go through the tribulation period at all. We should be the ones that are caught up in the beginning, right? And we can watch it on Zoom. You know, it's funny about prophecy. Revelation, I'll just give you an example. Revelation tells us about the 2 witnesses. And many think it's going to be Moses and Elijah, because Moses represents the law and Elijah represents the prophets. But we don't know that for sure, but that is the common belief. But what I do know is that during that first 3.5 years, the Antichrist is going to make a deal with all the enemies around Israel. A period of peace. And they're going to allow them to rebuild the temple. And oh, by the way, the stuff that goes in the temple is already being built. If that doesn't tell you something about timing, think about it. I don't believe it's that far away. We're in the time of the Gentiles. And then when you read Revelation in the beginning, it talks about the 7 churches. Each one of those churches represents a period of time, from the time Christ died on the cross until the time of the Gentiles, until the last church, which is Laodicea, the falling away. Anybody been watching the news lately? What do you see? A lot of falling away. But when that period's over and Christ appears in the clouds, now the clock is going to start, and that 70th week is going to occur, the 7-year period. But the thing about it is, the way Revelation talks about the two witnesses, for instance, everybody's going to witness it. I don't care where you are on earth. How can that be? Technology. Think about it. It's been 2,000 years roughly since Christ died on the cross, right? In the first 1,900 of those years, pretty much everything was the same. Over the last 100 years or so, holy moly, how much technology has gone. That should tell you something. Because for these things in Revelation to happen, and they're saying everybody's going to see it, how's that going to happen? Think. Right here on Zoom, or on the TV, right on our phones. I believe these times are closer than we may think. But if you remember in Matthew, it tells us we do not know the time or the place. We don't know the time. Jesus doesn't know the time. But what Jesus does tell us is you better be ready. Because if you're not ready, it's too late when we leave this form. There's not a second chance. So I don't understand how people cannot take it serious. I think it's something that we all should always keep in mind about it. You know, there's about 90% of all prophecies have been fulfilled. 100% of that 90%. Not one that hasn't been fulfilled. There's about 10% that hasn't been filled, and I have kind of talked about some of that. Those are the things that are to come. If we look in Samuel 7 that we just read, that's a prophecy from the prophet Nathan, a court prophet of David. He also was involved in the transition for Solomon too. All right. So you start out in Genesis, and since we're talking about David, here's Jacob. Everybody remembers Jacob, right? In Genesis 49, verse 10, he talks about, in Genesis 49, he's an old man. And he gets up and he speaks over his sons. And most of them have frittered away their things and so on, except for a couple. One of those was Judah. And let me tell you what he says. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like the lioness who dares to rouse him. Here's the really important verse. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of all nations shall be his. You know who he's referring to? the Messiah. He's referring to until Jesus Christ comes, that scepter will not pass. And Jesus will accept this scepter. So it goes all the way back to Genesis. And in Deuteronomy, it talks about the Jews being scattered everywhere. Then in Jeremiah, God makes a covenant saying that at some point in the time, the Jews will be gathered back from everywhere they were scattered and replanted on the land of their ancestors. Guess what? What happened in 1947? Didn't that happen? The Jews were replanted in Israel. The only nation ever to accomplish that. Does that tell us something? I believe we're closer than we think. Now, David, he really wanted to build a house. Jim talked about last week about, they're bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, and then that unfortunate situation happened, and everything stopped. Well, now it's the point where David is bringing the Ark to Jerusalem, and he really wants to build a house. He really does. And Nathan says, yeah, go ahead, I agree. Why not? The Lord should love it. But what did Nathan not do? He didn't consult God. So that night, Nathan, he gets a call from God. And God tells him, no, here's what you're going to tell David. David, you are not going to build a house for me. I mean, what are you talking about, build a house for me? I am content. But I am going to build a house for you. God wasn't talking about a physical house. He's talking about a house, a dynasty. Just when you go back to Genesis 49, when Jacob is talking over his sons and he's talking to Jude, it's the dynasty of David. In which takes us, if we go back forward in history, we get to Mary, right? And Joseph. Matthew runs the lineage through the kings, which gives the authority. From Mary's side, it's the biological linkage. It's the biological linkage. And it runs through Nathan. And who is Nathan? I'm not talking about Nathan the prophet. I am talking about Nathan, the third son of David and Bathsheba. So the lineage, either way, goes back to David. That's what Nathan prophesied here through God, the message that he gave to David from God. And God held his end of the bargain. No matter, most of the kings after David and Solomon were not good kings. In fact, so much that God had Babylon come in and destroy Jerusalem and ended the line of the kings. But the lineage still continued from that king, even though they weren't sitting rulers. So Matthew maps that back. Where Mary goes through Nathan. But either way, God fulfilled his promise. So why didn't God let David build the temple. Well, I'd like to read something to you from 1 Chronicles 22, verses 6 through 10. This is pretty interesting. Then he called for his son Solomon, this is David, and charged him to build a house for the Lord, the God of Israel. David said to Solomon, "My son, I had it in my heart to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. But this word of the Lord came to me. You have shed much blood and have fought many wars. You are not to build the house by my name, because you have shed much blood on the earth in my sight." So that's why David wasn't the one to build the temple. It goes on to say, "But you will have a son who will be a man of peace and rest, and I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side. His name will be Solomon, and I will grant Israel peace and quiet during his reign. He is the one who will build the house for my name. He will be my son, I will be his father, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever." Now, obviously, Solomon didn't live forever. What David is telling Solomon is that the house, the dynasty through Solomon, will live forever. But during Solomon's reign, it was a period of peace. Solomon wasn't perfect. He started off great, kind of waned there towards the end. But it was an era of peace, which is also a reference to Jesus. How many times did Jesus say, "Peace be with you"? Now, David, he raised a ton of money and all kinds of materials and everything. He made all the plans. And who did he give it to? Solomon. And he says, you can add to this too, by the way. But it was Solomon's charge because he didn't have all the stuff on his hands that David had. And God made a promise to David that his dynasty would be forever. And that lineage goes to the Messiah. So when we think about prophecy, and if you ever want to know what references, I have tons of references, and I log every one. But if you ever want those references so you can cruise through them, just drop me an email, send me a text. I'd be happy to share. But it's important for us to know, because not knowing will not get us to where we want to go. We need to know what's ahead of us. We need to know what it takes to be caught up so that we don't have to go through the 70th week. God loves us, and He's told us everything that we need to incorporate in our lives. But He doesn't make us. Whose decision is that? It's a personal decision. And there are consequences to the choices we make. Good consequences if we follow God, follow Jesus. Not so good consequences if we choose not to. If we choose not to, Satan is ready for us. Satan knows he can't defeat God, but the way he gets back at God is going after his children. And we do not want him to go after us because we follow Jesus. There's nobody loves us more than him.
Please stand if you wish and join with us now in singing our closing hymn, Make Us, O God, a Church That Shares, hymn number 657, led by the Cole Choir and followed by the Sending Forth. God is calling for a prophetic community to emerge, drawn from the nations of the world, that is characterized by uncommon devotion to the compassion and peace of God revealed in Jesus Christ. Through divine grace and wisdom, this faith community has been given abundant gifts, resources, and opportunities to equip it to become such a people. Let us go into the world armed, attuned to hear the prophetic, embody our mission, Christ's mission, go with God. So that closed captioning is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Who was doing the transcribing? That was pretty neat.
I think it's built into the software of Zoom or.
Yeah, it's built in.
Oh, live transcription.
And now our YouTube posts are available. You may have to hit the CC to turn it on, but the YouTube posts also have at least, I think, all of them, not past ones, but all of the coming ones, I think will have that option working.
Nice.
It's funny though, I was watching when at the beginning when Richard was talking about our website and he said Sea of Christ. It spelled out SEA of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
first day that turned on, we were doing a couple of different foreign language hymns, and I had a lot of fun with those.
I
Now,
can imagine.
Actually, that transcript can be, somebody can go through and manually change words.
Oh, okay.
But it,
That would take a lot of work.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what
Most
I thought.
people,
I thought there was somebody at the church that was sitting there trying to keep up with everybody. I
most
think, man,
people,
their hands are going to be tired by the end of it.
no, we could do that if we had somebody who's got the training. But yeah, most people who use the closed captions already have in their mind the intention and can make the contextual changes. So, I'm not really that worried because the
Yeah.
people who need it are probably
how
going
to
to do
read it.
okay. Yeah.
So
We're pretty used to it.
the idea of a SEA of Christ would be kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know who else the C would belong to.
Yeah.
Oh.
So Jim, are you going home and taking a nap like I was intending to?
I am home.
Oh, you
I
are?
did. Yeah, I can't. Sitting is very painful, so I have to be able to move, stretch, and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I'm home.
Yeah, I don't have the nausea anymore, but I didn't